Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Wildlife Ecology and Management final presentation. It is about North Atlantic right whales. I'd like to start off by introducing a little bit of background information about North Atlantic right whales. They inhabit temperate and subpolar waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. They can be found in regions such as Iceland, the Gulf of Mexico, Nova Scotia, Florida, you name it. Habitats include shallow and coastal waters. They can be often found swimming near bays and peninsulas. They're mostly black in color with patches of white on their undersides. They are approximately 14 to 20 feet in length. Mating often takes place between December to March. Calves are born during the wintertime, and they reach sexual maturity at 5 to 10 years old. A little bit of historical information about the North Atlantic right whales. To this day, they are the most critically endangered whale species in the world. There are less than 300 individuals remaining as of this time. Their endangerment mostly includes, dating back to the 10th century, they have been victims of intense whaling. During the 19th century, about 100,000 whales were killed off due to intense whaling. 1937 was the beginning of when whale conservation became an important and vital issue. That was when whaling became banned, and the beginning of whale conservation was on the rise. However, it didn't take until 40 years later, when 1972, the United States government passed the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This is to guarantee the safety and protection of all endangered marine mammal species, including the North Atlantic right whales. 1 year later, these whales were placed under the Endangered Species Act. Therefore, absolutely no harm can come of them, and the U.S. government made it its goal to restore the lost numbers of this species as well as many other endangered species across the United States. Still to this day, however, North Atlantic right whales still face threats, such as ship collisions, fishing gear entanglement, pollution, habitat disruption, and many other categories. At this current population rate, North Atlantic right whales might become extinct in the next century or two. So, human-related issues. This is where I put a lot of concentration into my presentation. Anthropogenic activity is one of the leading contributors to why North Atlantic right whales are so endangered. Many activities, such as commercial fishing, are major stressors on these animals. Commercial fishing, large nets, fishing lines. Whales and many other animals tend to get caught and entangled in large fishing nets, and it causes severe injuries, and these injuries can prove to be fatal. Many times they find themselves wrapped around the netting to the point where it's wrapped around their necks, and whales and other animals often suffocate as a result. For head-on collisions with ships, this is because whales rest and feed at the surface of the ocean. And since they're distracted doing such, that makes them easy targets for collisions with nautical vessels. Severe injuries from fishing entanglements and ship collisions often include cuts and gashes, mostly caused by propeller blades, internal hemorrhaging, and broken bones. The problem with these injuries is that it affects their ability to move, it affects their locomotion, and their ability to feed properly. So I like to put a lot of concentration into whale vessel collisions, because this is probably the largest contributor to right whale endangerment. So as I said before, ship strikes often lead to physical damage, deep cuts and wounds, broken bones, internal hemorrhaging, or many of these times these accidents have become fatal. Ship collisions happen in regions that have intense whale feeding, where intense whale feeding is present. Because, as whales, North Atlantic right whales mostly feed on krill and plankton, which are also of marketable value to commercial fisheries. So, where whales tend to feed, that's where fishermen often send their ships to collect marketable goods such as krill, plankton, invertebrates, crustaceans, to name a few. So the biggest problem is that there are conflicts of habitats and resources between whales and fishing stripes, and that's what leads to the deadly ship strikes. I'd like to talk about management strategies that have been proven effective in the past. The first act of legal protection for North Atlantic right whales started in 1931 with the Convention for the Regulation of Whaling. This protected whales from intense whaling, as I mentioned before. However, it was a step in the right direction, but it made little significant impact. It didn't take until decades later when the United States passed the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammals Protection Act in 1972 and 1973. That way, as federal documents that guaranteed the safety and protection of these animals, absolutely no harm can come of them. And then in 2003, Canada did the same exact thing with the Species at Risk Act, which is basically their equivalent of the Endangered Species Act here in the U.S. The Canadian federal government has actually put a lot of effort and action into the protection of right whales. They altered shipping routes, deviating ships away from popular whale feeding grounds, such as in the Bay of Fundy and the Scotian Shelf. The U.S. and Canada has also applied speed reduction regulations for when ships are docking and departing from harbors and ports. This way, by slowing down their speed, they could avoid potential collisions with whales, giving whales or the ships enough time to maneuver and avoid any other fatal accidents. In 2007, in response to severe whale deaths and population decreases, Southern California worked with the U.S. Coast Guard and applied the Whale Advisory Zone. I know this is the Pacific Ocean, not the Atlantic Ocean, but I do believe this makes a valid example. So the Whale Advisory Zone is a protected zone where huge whale congregations occur. By setting up boundaries, this zone is granted protection by the U.S. Coast Guard. Therefore, no ships is allowed to come within this zone. And they are lured away from the Whale Advisory Zone for the protection of North Atlantic right whales. So my proposal, an important idea is to work with commercial fisheries, because commercial fishing, again, is a major contributor to why North Atlantic right whales are suffering. However, we cannot just simply cancel fishing, put an end to it altogether, because it's an economic industry. However, we can work with commercial fisheries, fishermen, and try to find alternative solutions by listening to the stakeholders, because listening to the people is just as important as finding a way to protect the animals. We could explain to them damages being done onto the whales using historical data in order to find a compromise. Much like the Whale Advisory Zone in the Pacific, a good management strategy would be to locate important whale feeding grounds in the Atlantic Ocean, set up boundaries, and make these zones safe for the whales so that no harm can come of them by human actions. Also, I would also like to enforce more speed reduction regulations in many parts of the U.S. or North American Atlantic coastline. Therefore, with speed reduction, more and more whale deaths can be avoided due to being ran over by ships. I would also like to apply economic thinking. I discovered an article about economic thinking, and I think it's a good way to influence people's behaviors. By offering fishermen incentives, such as payment, it could change their perspectives on the situation and may make them more willing to cooperate in the whale conservation dilemma. With the help of fishermen, we might be able to find successful management strategies and reach a compromise that could satisfy both the safety of the whales as well as not negatively influencing the commercial fishing industry. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this presentation was educational, and have a pleasant day. Thank you very much.